Matthew chapter 14. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the report about Jesus. "This is John the Baptist," he told his servants. "He has been raised from the dead, and that's why these supernatural powers are at work in him." For Herod had arrested John, chained him, and put him in prison on account of his wife, of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, since John had been telling him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Though he wanted to kill him, he feared the crowd, since they regarded him as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday celebration came, Herodias' daughter danced before them and pleased Herod. So he promised on oath to give her whatever she might ask, and, prompted by her mother, she answered, "Give me John the Baptist's head here on a platter." Although the king regretted it, he commanded that it be granted because of his oath and his guests. So he sent orders and had John beheaded in prison. His head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. Then his disciples came and removed the corpse, and buried it, and went and reported to Jesus. When Jesus heard about this, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. When the crowds heard of this, they followed him on foot from the towns. As he stepped ashore, he saw a huge crowd, felt compassion on them, and healed their sick. When evening came, the disciples approached him and said, "This place is a wilderness, and it is already late. Send the crowds away so that they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." "They don't need to go away," Jesus told them. "You give them something to eat." "But we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish here," they said to him. "Bring them here to me," he said. And then he commanded the crowds to sit down in the grass. He took 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them. He broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. The disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate and was filled. And then they picked up 12 basketfuls of leftover pieces. Now those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides the women and children. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. After dismissing the crowds, he went up onto the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already over a mile from the land, battered by the waves because the wind was against them. Around 3 in the morning, he came toward them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. Immediately Jesus spoke to them. "Have courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Jesus, Lord, if it is you," Peter answered, "command me to come out to you on the water." "Come," he said. Climbing out of the boat, Peter started to walk on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid and began to sink, and he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught hold of him and said, "You have little faith. Why do you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And then those in the boat worshipped him and said, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Once they crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. When the men of that place recognized him, they alerted the whole vicinity and brought him all who were sick. They were begging him that they might only touch the tassel of his robe, and as many as touched it were made perfectly well. Chapter 15.